Standing in my childhood bedroom packing the last of my belongings into a worn duffel bag, I never imagined this would be how my relationship with my family ended. The words still echoed in my mind like shattered glass. If you cannot respect this family's values, Serafina, then you can live on the streets like the ungrateful daughter you have become. My father's voice had been cold final. 2 weeks later, when they discovered the truth about my $17 million annual income, their desperation would reach levels I never thought possible. But right now, you are probably wondering where you are watching this story from and how a family could turn so completely against their own blood. Before we dive into this tale of betrayal and ultimate justice, please hit that like button if you have ever felt misunderstood by your family, and do not forget to subscribe, because this story has twists that will leave you questioning everything you think you know about loyalty and revenge. The next part will reveal exactly what drove my father to make such a devastating choice. My name is Serafina Vale, and until 3 weeks ago, I believed my family loved me unconditionally. I had been living what I thought was a perfectly normal life as the middle child in a family of 5. My older brother Marcus was the golden child, the successful lawyer who could do no wrong in my parents' eyes. My younger sister Celeste was the baby, the artist who received endless emotional and financial support for her creative endeavors. And then there was me, the software developer who had been quietly building something extraordinary, while my family assumed I was just another struggling tech worker. The trouble began when I started asking questions about our family's financial situation. My parents, Robert and Margaret Vale, had always lived modestly, despite my father's position as a bank manager, and my mother's work as a high school principal. They drove older cars, lived in the same small suburban home for 20 years, and constantly complained about money. Yet somehow Marcus's law school debt had been mysteriously paid off, and Celeste's expensive art supplies and studio rent were never an issue. I had been contributing $500 monthly to help with household expenses, believing I was supporting a family that was genuinely struggling. This contribution represented a significant portion of what they believed was my modest salary as a junior developer. What they did not know was that I had founded a cryptocurrency analytics platform 3 years earlier that had become one of the most successful fintech startups in the country. The first red flag came during Thanksgiving dinner when Marcus casually mentioned purchasing a luxury watch worth $15,000. When I expressed surprise at such an expensive purchase, my father quickly changed the subject, but not before I caught the uncomfortable glance exchanged between my parents. That night, I overheard a heated conversation between them about keeping Serafina in the dark and maintaining the arrangement. My suspicions deepened when I discovered that Celeste had been receiving monthly payments of $3,000, supposedly for her art career, while I was told repeatedly that the family budget was too tight to help with my own professional development. The favoritism was not just emotional, it was financial and systematic. The breaking point came when I offered to help pay for my grandmother's medical bills. My grandmother Elena had been diagnosed with a rare condition requiring expensive treatment that insurance would not cover. When I volunteered to contribute $10,000 toward her care, my father's reaction was explosive. He accused me of showing off and making the rest of the family look bad with money I supposedly did not have. "Where would someone like you get that kind of money?" he demanded, his face flushed with anger. "You make $30,000 a year at that little tech job of yours. Stop pretending to be something you are not." That was the moment I realized the depth of their deception. They had been deliberately keeping me positioned as the family's financial underdog while secretly funneling resources to my siblings. The monthly contributions I made were not helping with household expenses. They were being redistributed to Marcus and Celeste, while I was painted as the struggling child who needed to learn responsibility. When I pressed further about the family's true financial situation, my mother's response was particularly cruel. "Serafina, you have always been the most selfish of our children. Everything has to be about you. Your brother and sister have real careers with real potential. We invest in success, not in pipe dreams." The pipe dreams comment stung because they had never bothered to ask about my actual work. They assumed that because I worked from home and did not wear suits to an office, I must be unsuccessful. They saw my flexible schedule and casual dress as signs of failure rather than the freedom that came with building a multi-million-dollar business. The final confrontation occurred when I suggested the family needed to have an honest conversation about money and fairness. I had discovered through some careful investigation that my parents had accumulated significant savings partly through my monthly contributions, which they had been investing while telling me they were struggling to pay bills. My father's response was to give me an ultimatum. "If you cannot accept your place in this family and stop causing trouble with your accusations and jealousy, then you are no longer welcome here. We have built a harmonious family dynamic, and we will not let you destroy it with your bitterness." When I stood my ground and demanded transparency, he delivered the final blow. "Pack your things, Serafina. If you cannot respect this family's values and hierarchy, you can see how well you survive on your own. Maybe living on the streets will teach you some gratitude for what you had here." The cruelty of those words, combined with my mother's silent agreement and my siblings' complete lack of protest, revealed everything I needed to know about my true position in their lives. I was not a beloved daughter. I was a convenient source of income and a scapegoat for their own insecurities about success and money. As I packed my belongings that night, listening to them discuss how my departure would finally bring peace to the house, I made a decision that would change everything. I would not reveal the truth about my financial success immediately. Instead, I would let them live with their assumptions while I carefully planned my next move. They wanted to see me fail and come crawling back begging for forgiveness and acceptance. They had no idea that their rejection had just freed me to stop hiding who I really was and what I had built. The daughter they had dismissed as a failure was about to become their greatest regret. Living in a luxury downtown apartment that cost more per month than my family's mortgage payment, I spent the first week after my exile carefully documenting everything I had discovered about their financial manipulation. The irony was not lost on me that while they imagined me struggling to find shelter, I was actually living in more comfort than I had ever experienced at home. My apartment was a penthouse with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, complete with a home office equipped with multiple monitors for managing my business operations. The monthly rent alone was $12,000, an amount that would have shocked my family if they had any clue about my real financial situation. But they remained convinced I was suffering the consequences of my selfishness and would soon return home humbled and grateful. During this period of reflection, I began to understand the full scope of their deception. Using my skills in data analysis, I traced financial patterns and connections that revealed a 15-year history of systematic favoritism and emotional manipulation. My parents had not just failed to support me equally, they had actively worked to ensure I remained financially dependent while elevating my siblings. The breakthrough came when I hired a private investigator to examine my family's financial records more thoroughly. What we discovered was far worse than simple favoritism. My parents had been using my monthly contributions not just to support Marcus and Celeste, but to fund investments and savings accounts that they planned to leave exclusively to my siblings in their will. The investigator found that over the past 5 years, my $60,000 in contributions had been transformed into $140,000 through careful investment. None of this money was designated for me in their estate planning. Instead, their will specifically stated that I would receive only personal items and photographs because I had never demonstrated financial responsibility or family loyalty. Even more disturbing was the discovery that they had been telling Marcus and Celeste that my monthly contributions were actually loans that I would eventually need to pay back. They had created a narrative where I was the irresponsible family member who took advantage of their generosity, when in reality, I was the one funding their ability to be generous to my siblings. The most painful revelation came through text messages the investigator recovered from a family group chat that I had never been included in. The messages painted a picture of a family that actively discussed how to manage Serafina's expectations and keep her motivated to contribute. They had been strategizing about my life and finances like I was a project to be handled rather than a family member to be loved. One exchange from 6 months earlier was particularly devastating. My mother had written, "Serafina's been asking too many questions about money lately. We need to make sure she stays focused on helping the family instead of thinking about herself." My father's response was, "Do not worry. She does not have anywhere else to go, and she knows we are the only family she has. A little guilt about not contributing enough will keep her in line." Armed with this evidence, I began planning my response. But first, I wanted to see exactly how far they would take their narrative about my supposed failure and homelessness. I was curious about whether they would show any concern for my well-being, or if they would simply enjoy what they believed was my comeuppance. The answer came sooner than expected. Through a mutual friend, I learned that my parents had been telling people in their social circle that I had finally learned the hard lesson about respecting family, and that my absence had restored peace and harmony to their home. They were not worried about my safety or well-being. They were celebrating what they saw as their successful assertion of dominance. Marcus had apparently told his colleagues at the law firm that his entitled sister had been put in her place and was learning what the real world is like without family support. Celeste had posted on social media about how family boundaries were important and how sometimes tough love was necessary for people who take advantage of others' generosity. Their narrative was complete. I was the ungrateful, selfish daughter who had been rightfully expelled from the family for my bad attitude and lack of appreciation. They had convinced themselves and others that they were the victims of my unreasonable demands and accusations. This was when I decided it was time to begin revealing the truth, but not all at once. I wanted them to understand gradually that they had made the biggest mistake of their lives. The first step was to let them know that I was not struggling as they had hoped and expected. I arranged for a luxury car service to pick up some belongings I had left behind, timing the visit for when I knew the whole family would be home. When a black Mercedes pulled up to their modest suburban home and a professionally dressed driver approached their door with my business card, their smugness quickly turned to confusion. The driver delivered a simple message. Ms. Vale requested that I retrieve her remaining electronics and professional equipment. She also asked me to inform you that she is doing quite well and will be in touch soon regarding some family matters that need to be addressed. The business card identified me as the founder and CEO of Crypto Analytics Solutions, with a downtown address that anyone could easily research. It was enough information to plant seeds of doubt about their assumptions without revealing the full scope of their miscalculation. According to my source, the family spent that evening frantically Googling my company and trying to understand what they were looking at. The realization that I was not homeless or struggling began to sink in, but they still had no idea about the magnitude of their error. My mother apparently called my old phone number repeatedly that night, leaving voicemails that shifted from condescending concern to nervous attempts at reconciliation. "Serafina, honey, we should talk. There might have been some misunderstandings about the family situation. Please call me back so we can work this out." But I was not ready to work anything out. I was just getting started with showing them exactly who they had decided to betray and discard. The daughter they thought they could manipulate and control was about to demonstrate that she had never needed their approval or support. In fact, she had been the one supporting them all along. The week following my strategic revelation was a masterclass in watching a family's arrogance crumble in real time. My parents had gone from celebrating their successful banishment of their problematic daughter to frantically trying to understand what they had potentially lost. But I was not ready to give them the satisfaction of direct contact. Instead, I began building a network of allies who would help me expose the full truth about their manipulation and financial abuse. My first ally came from an unexpected source, my grandmother Elena, whose medical bills had been the catalyst for this entire confrontation. When I called to check on her health and explained that I would be covering her treatment costs regardless of my family's objections, she was initially confused about why I was estranged from my parents. "But Serafina, dear," she said in her gentle voice, "your parents told me you were going through financial difficulties, and that is why you could not help with my medical expenses. They said you were barely making ends meet." This was the opening I needed to begin unraveling their web of lies. I carefully explained the truth about my financial situation and the real reason for my exile from the family. My grandmother's shock quickly turned to outrage as she realized how her son and daughter-in-law had been manipulating everyone's perceptions. "They told me that Marcus and Celeste had been helping support you financially," she said, her voice trembling with anger. "They made it sound like you were the one receiving help, not giving it." "Oh, Serafina, what have they done?" My grandmother became my first and most powerful ally because she had witnessed decades of my parents' manipulation tactics. She revealed that this pattern of favoritism and deception went back to my childhood when my achievements were minimized while my siblings were celebrated. She had always wondered why I seemed so distant from the family, despite being such a successful and caring person. "Your mother used to call me and complain about how you were difficult and ungrateful," Elena told me. "But every time I saw you, you were nothing but kind and helpful." I started to suspect they were not telling me the whole truth about the family dynamics. With my grandmother's support, I began reaching out to other family friends and relatives who had been fed the narrative about my supposed failures and bad attitude. What I discovered was a systematic campaign to isolate me and justify their treatment of me to anyone who might question it. My Aunt Patricia, my father's sister, had been told that I was jealous of my siblings' success and caused drama whenever the family tried to help me improve my life. When I showed her the evidence of my actual career achievements and financial contributions to the family, she was appalled. "Robert always made it sound like you were the problem child," Patricia said during a long phone conversation. "He said you had unrealistic expectations and could not hold down a steady job. I feel sick knowing that I believed those lies and treated you differently because of them." Patricia revealed that my parents had been using similar tactics for years, painting me as unstable and unreliable to prevent other family members from getting too close to me or offering me support that might reveal the truth about my actual circumstances. The most shocking ally emerged when I reconnected with my college roommate Jessica, who worked in investigative journalism. When I told her about my situation, she immediately offered to help expose what she recognized as a textbook case of financial abuse and family scapegoating. "This is not just personal drama, Serafina," Jessica explained. "This is a story about how families can systematically abuse and exploit one member while maintaining a public image of respectability. People need to understand how this kind of manipulation works." Jessica's professional expertise proved invaluable in documenting and organizing the evidence I had gathered. She helped me understand that my family's behavior followed classic patterns of psychological and financial abuse, including isolation tactics, gaslighting, and economic exploitation. Through Jessica's connections, I was introduced to a family attorney who specialized in cases involving financial elder abuse and family manipulation. Attorney Sarah Morrison reviewed my documentation and was immediately interested in the case, not just for its legal implications, but for its potential to set precedents about financial abuse within families. "What your parents did constitutes a clear pattern of financial exploitation," Attorney Morrison explained. "They systematically deceived you about the family's financial situation, misappropriated your contributions, and used those resources to benefit your siblings while deliberately excluding you from any advantages. This goes beyond favoritism into the realm of actionable fraud." The legal team began building a comprehensive case that would not only recover my financial contributions, but also expose the full scope of my parents' deceptive practices. This included their misrepresentation of my financial situation to other family members, and their deliberate efforts to damage my reputation within the extended family network. Meanwhile, my business continued to thrive, providing me with both the resources and the credibility to pursue justice without worrying about my family's attempts to financially pressure me into submission. The irony that they had expelled their wealthiest family member while thinking they were punishing a struggling failure was not lost on anyone who learned the truth. During this period, I also discovered that several family friends had been uncomfortable with my parents' treatment of me, but had never spoken up because they believed the narrative about my supposed problems. Once they learned the truth, many of them expressed regret about not questioning what they had been told. One family friend, Dr. Martinez, who had known our family for 15 years, admitted that he had always found my parents' stories about me inconsistent with his personal interactions with me. "You were always polite, intelligent, and seemed very capable whenever I talked with you," he said. "But your parents always spoke about you like you were irresponsible and struggling. I should have trusted my own observations instead of their characterizations." These allies formed the foundation of what would become a comprehensive campaign to expose the truth about my family's behavior. But more importantly, they provided me with the emotional support and validation that I had been denied within my own family for years. As word began to spread through our extended social network about the real story behind my exile, my parents found themselves facing uncomfortable questions from people who had previously accepted their version of events without question. The image they had carefully constructed of themselves as patient, generous parents dealing with a difficult child was beginning to crumble. My mother's attempts to reach me became increasingly desperate. Her voicemails shifted from condescending offers of reconciliation to panicked pleas for communication. "Serafina, people are asking us questions we do not understand. Please call us so we can clear up these misunderstandings. We love you and want to work this out." But there were no misunderstandings to clear up. There was only the truth that they had spent years hiding, and that truth was finally coming to light. The daughter they had underestimated and discarded was proving to be far more formidable than they had ever imagined. The stage was set for the next phase of my plan, showing them exactly what they had lost and what their betrayal would cost them. But first, I needed to deal with an unexpected betrayal from within my own network of allies that would test everything I thought I knew about trust and loyalty. Just as I was beginning to feel confident about the strength of my support network, I discovered that trust could be weaponized even by those who claimed to be helping me. The betrayal came from the last person I expected, attorney Sarah Morrison, the family law specialist who had been building my case against my parents. 3 weeks into our legal preparation, I noticed that my parents' behavior had shifted dramatically. Instead of continuing their desperate attempts to contact me, they had suddenly become quiet and confident again. My grandmother mentioned during one of our regular calls that my father had seemed almost smug during a recent family dinner, telling everyone that Serafina's little tantrum will be resolved soon enough. This change in their demeanor puzzled me until Jessica's investigative instincts kicked in. She suggested we dig deeper into Attorney Morrison's background and recent activities. What we discovered was devastating. Morrison had been secretly communicating with my parents' legal counsel, sharing confidential information about our strategy and evidence. The betrayal became clear when Jessica found records showing that Morrison had received a substantial payment from a law firm that represented several of my father's banking colleagues. The payment was disguised as a consultation fee, but the timing coincided exactly with when she had gained access to all of my evidence against my parents. "Serafina," Jessica said during an emergency meeting at my apartment, "Morrison has been feeding your parents information about everything we plan to do. They know about the financial documentation, the witness statements from your grandmother and aunt, and our entire legal strategy." The depth of Morrison's betrayal was staggering. She had not only shared my confidential information, but had also advised my parents on how to counter my evidence. They had used this advanced knowledge to begin creating their own narrative, painting me as a vindictive daughter who was making false accusations because I was angry about being rightfully disciplined for my bad attitude. My parents had gotten ahead of my revelations by preemptively reaching out to family members with their own version of events. They claimed that I was lying about my financial success, and that my business was either fraudulent or greatly exaggerated. They suggested that my sudden claims of wealth were desperate attempts to save face after being expelled from the family for legitimate reasons. Marcus had apparently been instrumental in this counter-campaign, using his legal connections to validate their narrative. He told people that he had investigated my company and found irregularities that suggested I was not as successful as I claimed. These lies were particularly effective because they played into existing assumptions about my supposed failure. The most painful part of Morrison's betrayal was discovering that she had been reporting back to my parents about my emotional state and personal reactions during our meetings. They knew exactly how much their treatment had hurt me, and they were using that knowledge to craft a defense that portrayed me as emotionally unstable and unreliable. Morrison had told them about my tears when I described feeling like an outsider in my own family. She had shared my expressions of self-doubt about whether I had somehow deserved their treatment. They were now using these vulnerable moments against me, telling people that I had admitted to being difficult and problematic. When Jessica confronted Morrison directly about the conflict of interest and ethical violations, Morrison's response revealed the full scope of her deception. She claimed that she had been protecting me from making a mistake that would destroy my family relationships permanently. She argued that my parents deserved a chance to defend themselves and that family reconciliation was more important than revenge. "Your parents are respected members of this community," Morrison said with stunning arrogance. "They raised 3 children and have been married for 25 years. Maybe you should consider that you might be the one who needs to change your perspective and approach this situation more maturely." This response demonstrated that Morrison had never taken my case seriously. She had seen me as a spoiled daughter having a tantrum rather than a victim of systematic financial abuse. Her willingness to betray my trust confirmed that she shared my parents' view of me as someone whose concerns and experiences were not valid. The immediate consequence of Morrison's betrayal was that my parents felt emboldened to escalate their own campaign against me. They began spreading rumors in the community that I was having a breakdown and making wild accusations because I could not accept being held accountable for my behavior. They reached out to my business contacts claiming to be concerned family members who wanted to warn people that I might be going through mental health issues that could affect my professional reliability. This attack on my business reputation was a direct assault on the foundation of my independence and success. My father even had the audacity to call my grandmother and suggest that my financial support for her medical treatment might be coming from questionable sources. He planted seeds of doubt about whether my money was legitimate, hoping to turn even my strongest ally against me. The betrayal left me feeling more isolated than I had since the original exile from my family. I had trusted Morrison with my most sensitive information and painful experiences, only to have her use that trust as a weapon against me. It was a reminder that the patterns of manipulation and betrayal I had experienced within my family could extend beyond blood relationships. But Morrison had made one critical mistake in her assessment of my character and resources. She had underestimated my ability to recover from setbacks and my determination to see justice served. What she thought would be a devastating blow that would force me to retreat and seek reconciliation actually strengthened my resolve to expose the truth completely. The betrayal also revealed important information about my parents' strategy and resources. If they were willing to corrupt a legal professional and launch a preemptive campaign against me, it confirmed that they understood exactly how damaging the truth about their behavior would be. They were not acting from a position of strength, they were acting from desperation. Most importantly, Morrison's betrayal helped me understand that I needed allies who had skin in the game, people who would benefit from the truth being revealed, rather than from maintaining the status quo. The next phase of my plan would require finding someone with both the power and the motivation to help me achieve complete vindication. The daughter they had tried to silence was about to prove that she was far more resourceful and determined than anyone had imagined. Morrison's betrayal had been a setback, but it was about to become the catalyst for their complete downfall. The aftermath of Attorney Morrison's betrayal could have destroyed my case, but instead it led me to the most powerful ally I could have imagined, someone with both the authority and the personal motivation to ensure that justice was served completely. This ally emerged from within the very institution that my father had used to build his reputation and credibility in the community. Following Morrison's ethical violations, Jessica connected me with a federal investigator named Agent Rebecca Torres, who specialized in financial fraud cases involving banking professionals. When Torres learned that my father was a bank manager who had potentially used his position to enhance his personal investment strategies using money obtained through family manipulation, she became very interested in examining the broader implications of his behavior. What you have described goes beyond family dynamics, Agent Torres explained during our first meeting. If your father has been using sophisticated financial manipulation within his family while working in a position of trust at a bank, it suggests patterns of behavior that could extend into his professional responsibilities. Agent Torres's investigation revealed something that even I had not suspected. My father had been using his position at the bank to gain insider information about investment opportunities, which he then used to multiply the money he had taken from me through his deceptive family financial arrangements. This transformed my case from a family dispute into a federal investigation of professional misconduct and potential securities fraud. The evidence was overwhelming once Torres applied federal investigative resources to examine my father's financial activities. Bank records showed that he had been making unusually successful investments that coincided with confidential information he would have accessed through his position. The profits from these investments had been used to fund Marcus's law career and Celeste's art pursuits while maintaining the facade of a struggling family. More damaging was the discovery that my father had been recommending similar investment strategies to bank customers without disclosing his use of insider information. Several of these customers had lost significant money following his advice, while he personally profited from the same information sources. This pattern of behavior demonstrated that his willingness to manipulate and deceive extended far beyond his treatment of me. Agent Torres also uncovered evidence that my parents had been systematically underreporting their income and assets to qualify for various financial assistance programs, including reduced college tuition rates for my siblings. They had hidden their true financial situation not just from me, but from institutions that had provided them with benefits based on false representations of their economic status. The federal investigation provided me with resources and credibility that Morrison's betrayal could never have taken away. When Agent Torres interviewed my family members as part of the official investigation, their carefully constructed narratives began to collapse under professional scrutiny. Marcus's attempt to discredit my business failed spectacularly when federal investigators verified not only my company's legitimacy, but its impressive financial performance. The investigators confirmed that my annual income was actually higher than I had initially claimed, exceeding $17 million in the most recent tax year. This validation destroyed my family's narrative about my supposed financial instability and dishonesty. Even more satisfying was watching Marcus realize that his attempt to use his legal connections to undermine me had backfired completely. The federal investigation revealed that some of his own financial arrangements with our parents might constitute undisclosed gifts that should have been reported for tax purposes. His role as the successful sibling was suddenly complicated by potential legal jeopardy. Celeste's situation became equally uncomfortable when investigators discovered that her art career had been funded entirely through what appeared to be money laundering schemes designed to hide the true sources of my father's investment profits. Her social media posts about family boundaries and tough love were preserved as evidence of the family's coordinated effort to justify their financial abuse. The investigation also revealed the full scope of Morrison's ethical violations. Agent Torres discovered that Morrison had been involved in similar schemes with other wealthy families, using confidential client information to broker settlements that benefited all parties except the clients she was supposed to represent. My case became part of a broader investigation into legal professional corruption that would ultimately result in Morrison losing her license to practice law. But the most powerful piece of evidence came from an unexpected source: my father's own bank, which had been conducting an internal investigation of his activities following suspicious transaction reports. When federal investigators coordinated with the bank's compliance department, they found extensive documentation of my father's misuse of his position for personal gain. The bank's internal investigation revealed that my father had been violating federal banking regulations for over 5 years, using his access to customer financial information to guide his personal investments. The bank had been building a case against him independently, and my situation provided the final pieces of evidence they needed to pursue criminal charges. This convergence of federal, state, and institutional investigations created an unstoppable momentum toward complete exposure and accountability. My parents could no longer dismiss my accusations as the complaints of a bitter daughter because federal agents and banking regulators were now documenting the same patterns of deception and manipulation that I had experienced personally. The community that had once accepted my parents' portrayal of me as a problematic child was now reading news reports about federal investigations and banking violations. The narrative had shifted completely from difficult daughter makes false accusations to respected bank manager exposed in fraud investigation triggered by daughter's courageous whistleblowing. Agent Torres kept me informed about the investigation's progress, and each revelation confirmed that my instincts about my family's deception had been not only accurate, but actually understated. The financial abuse I had suffered was part of a much larger pattern of fraudulent behavior that had harmed multiple people and institutions. As the investigation neared its conclusion, my parents made one final desperate attempt to salvage their situation. They reached out through my grandmother, offering a complete confession and apology in exchange for my help in avoiding criminal charges. They claimed they were ready to return all the money they had taken from me and publicly acknowledge their wrongdoing. But their offer came too late and included too little. They were not offering accountability, they were offering damage control. They wanted to minimize their legal jeopardy while maintaining as much of their social reputation as possible. They still had not acknowledged the emotional and psychological damage their manipulation had caused, and they showed no genuine understanding of why their behavior had been fundamentally wrong. The federal investigation had given me something more valuable than money or apologies, complete vindication, and the power to ensure that their behavior had meaningful consequences. The daughter they had dismissed and discarded was about to deliver justice that would reshape their lives permanently. The final phase of this story unfolded with the kind of comprehensive justice that rarely happens in real life, but felt absolutely appropriate given the scope of my family's deception and manipulation. When the federal investigation concluded 6 months after my exile, the consequences for my parents were both immediate and lasting, while the transformation in my own life exceeded anything I could have imagined when I first packed that duffel bag. My father's criminal trial became a local sensation covered extensively by media outlets that Jessica helped coordinate to ensure the full story reached the widest possible audience. The evidence presented in court documented not just his professional misconduct, but the systematic family financial abuse that had triggered the entire investigation. The prosecution used my case as a primary example of how his willingness to manipulate and deceive had extended into every aspect of his life. The judge's sentencing was particularly satisfying because it addressed both the legal violations and the personal betrayal that had started this journey. My father received 18 months in federal prison, followed by 3 years of supervised probation, during which he was prohibited from working in any financial services capacity. The court also ordered full restitution not just of the money he had taken from me, but of the profits he had generated using that money and his insider information. The restitution amount stunned everyone, including me. $473,000, representing not only my original contributions, but the compound interest and investment gains that should have been mine over 5 years. This financial judgment was separate from the additional civil penalties and disgorgement orders that would ultimately cost my family their house, their savings, and their social standing in the community. My mother's role as an enabler and co-conspirator resulted in her own legal consequences, including criminal charges for tax fraud related to their underreported income and fraudulent benefit claims. While she avoided prison time through a plea agreement, she received 2 years of supervised probation and substantial community service requirements. More importantly, she was forced to make public admissions about their treatment of me as part of her plea agreement. The impact on Marcus and Celeste was equally transformative, though their consequences were primarily civil rather than criminal. The court determined that they had been unjust enrichment beneficiaries of their parents' fraudulent schemes requiring them to return funds that had been used for Marcus's law school expenses and Celeste's art career support. Marcus faced additional professional consequences when the State Bar Association investigated his role in spreading false information about my business and his failure to disclose potential conflicts of interest related to his family's legal situation. While he avoided disbarment, he received a public censure and mandatory ethics training that became part of his permanent professional record. Celeste's situation was perhaps the most dramatically altered, as the investigation revealed that virtually every aspect of her artistic career had been funded through fraudulent means. The art studio, the expensive supplies, even several gallery showings had been paid for with money that had been systematically stolen from me and enhanced through illegal trading activities. She was forced to liquidate her art collection and equipment to contribute to the restitution payments. But beyond the legal consequences, the most satisfying aspect of this resolution was watching the complete collapse of the narrative they had constructed about me and our family dynamics. The community that had once accepted their portrayal of me as an ungrateful, problematic daughter now understood the true story. I had been the family's primary financial contributor and the victim of sophisticated psychological and economic abuse. The vindication extended to my professional reputation, which had not only been cleared of their false accusations, but had actually been enhanced by the publicity surrounding the case. My courage in pursuing justice against powerful family members was viewed as evidence of strong ethical character, and my business grew significantly as clients and partners appreciated working with someone who had proven their integrity under extreme pressure. Most importantly, this experience taught me invaluable lessons about chosen family versus biological family. The allies who had supported me throughout this ordeal, my grandmother Elena, my Aunt Patricia Jessica, Agent Torres, and many others, had proven that loyalty and love are earned through actions not inherited through genetics. My grandmother Elena, whose medical treatment had been the original catalyst for this confrontation, lived to see complete justice served. She passed away peacefully, 8 months after the trial, knowing that her granddaughter had not only survived her family's betrayal, but had used it as an opportunity to build a better, more authentic life. Her final words to me were, "You showed them that integrity is more powerful than manipulation, sweetheart. I am so proud of who you chose to become." Today, 3 years after that ultimatum in my childhood bedroom, I understand that my father's cruel words about living on the streets actually set me free from a toxic family system that had been constraining my potential and happiness for decades. The daughter they thought they were punishing for being ungrateful turned out to be the most successful and generous person in the entire family. I now run a philanthropic foundation in addition to my business focusing specifically on helping young adults who have been financially abused or manipulated by their families. The foundation has already assisted over 200 people in situations similar to mine, providing both financial support and legal resources to pursue justice against family members who exploit trust and love for personal gain. The irony is not lost on me that my parents' attempt to teach me a lesson about respect and gratitude actually taught me the most valuable lesson of my life, that self-respect is more important than family approval, and that sometimes the greatest act of love is refusing to enable people's worst behaviors, even when those people are your own blood relatives. As I finish sharing this story with you, I want to ask, have you ever experienced a situation where family loyalty was used as a weapon against your own well-being and success? Have you ever discovered that the people who claimed to love you were actually working against your best interests? How did you handle the choice between keeping peace and pursuing justice? Please share your own experiences in the comments below, because these stories need to be told and heard. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to this channel for more real-life stories about overcoming family manipulation and finding the courage to choose your own path. Share this video with anyone who might need to hear that they deserve better treatment than they are receiving even from family members. Thank you for listening to my journey from exile to vindication. I hope it reminds you that your worth is not determined by how others treat you, but by how you choose to respond when that treatment falls short of what you deserve. Sometimes the family that rejects you is actually giving you the greatest gift possible, the freedom to discover who you really are and what you are truly capable of achieving. Remember, blood may be thicker than water, but respect, integrity, and genuine love are thicker than blood. Choose the people who choose you, and never let anyone convince you that you should accept less than you deserve simply because they share your DNA. Justice may take time, but it always finds a way to the surface, especially when you have the courage to stand up for what is right.